is up, math superstars? In this edition of Mr. Peterson Presents, we're bringing to you video number 2, and in this video about inequalities, we're going to talk about how to graph inequalities. And so if you missed my introduction to inequalities, watch that first and then watch this video. So let's talk about how we can graph these inequalities. And so we're going to talk about when we see the greater than sign. And so here we have this inequality. We have x is greater than 2. And so we can say that any number that we put in for x has to be bigger than 2. So here's how we graph this on our number line. The first thing is that we're going to put an open circle. So this is going to be important. We're going to talk about the difference between open and closed. An open circle on the number. So we're going to find number 2 and put an open circle there. Because we know that in our solution, if I put numbers in, these numbers, if I put in 2, 2 is not greater than 2. So that is not going to work. That's why we're going to do an open circle. So now we need to figure out the numbers that are going to be bigger than 2. So we know 3 is bigger than 2, 4 is bigger than 2, 5 is bigger than 2. So the second step is that I'm going to color in the number line with all of the numbers that are bigger than 2. And so this is going to show me with the open circle on 2 and the arrow filling in all the solutions that any one of these numbers along this number line that's colored in is bigger than 2. So now let's take a look at it when it looks a little different. This time we have the variable on the right hand side. And so the way we read this is 2 is going to be bigger or greater than all of these numbers here. And so the same thing like we did in a previous one, we're going to find 2 and put an open circle on that. Because we know that 2 is not going to be greater than 2. Those are equal. So the open circle tells me 2 is not going to work. And so in this case, all these numbers have to be less than 2. So 2 is obviously bigger than all the numbers. So we know that 2 is bigger than 1, 2 is bigger than 0, 2 is bigger than -1. And so my arrow has the color in the opposite direction from the previous example here. And so if I was gonna read this, so all of these numbers are smaller than 2. So I can say that any number I put in 2 is going to be bigger than -10, -2, and so on. So that's why this works. So let's talk about greater than or equal to. And so this time we're going to use a closed circle on the number. And so here's the way this works. So we have x has to be greater than or equal to -1. And so what I can do is I'm going to put a closed circle, and here's why. This is telling me that I can also use -1. I can say -1 is greater than or equal to -1. So it's going to be either one of those. So now, since I have my closed circle on -1, let's try to find out which way the arrow is going to be colored in. And so in this case, I need to find all the numbers that are going to be bigger than -1. So 0 is bigger than -1, 1 is bigger. So in this case, I'm going to fill in my arrow going to the right. So now let's take a look at the greater than sign when the variable is on the right hand side. So just in my previous example, I'm going to do the uncolored in circle. We call them a closed circle on -1. And so I need to find all the numbers now that are going to be smaller than -1, because in this case, -1 has to be bigger than all of these numbers here. And so any number I put in, so -1's bigger than this one, it's bigger than this one. And so we can say that the arrow is going to be pointed to the left. So now let's take a look at the less than sign. And so you notice that x is less than -2. So all the numbers have to be smaller than 2. And so let's go ahead and put an open circle on 2, because I can say 2 is not less than 2. 2 is equal to 2. So I'm going to put an open circle on 2. And now what I got is I need to find all the numbers that are smaller than 2. So we say 1 is smaller, 0 is smaller. And so I can find that my arrow is going to the left here. And so you might start trying to think of different tricks to remember. You might say, well, look at the way the less than sign's pointing, and look at the way the arrow's going. See, that might work, but in this case, I have the variable on the right-hand side now. And so the trick only works half the time, and so you have to be really, really careful about how to read these. So in this case, I have 2 is going to be smaller than all the numbers that I put in for x. So once again, I'm going to do the open circle on 2, and any number I put in, 2 has to be smaller than it. So I have 2 smaller than 3, 2 smaller than 4. So my arrow is going to be going to the right this time. And so that's why I say you gotta be super careful. Some of you might have known this trick or been taught it in the past, which way wherever the sign is pointing, that's the way the arrow is going. But that's gonna mess you up as far as doing problems like this where you have the variable on the right. So now we have less than or equal to, and so in this case we're going to do the closed number or the closed circle, and the closed circle is going to be on +3 this time. And so I know that in my solutions that if I put in 3, 3 isn't less than, but 3 is equal to 3, and so that's why I'm going to do a closed circle on 3. In this case, I have to find all these numbers. Any number I put in for x here has to be less than +3. So I know I can put in 2, I can put in 1, and so my arrow's going to the left. And so in my last case here, we have the variable here on the right. We still have +3, so +3, I'm going to fill that in with a closed circle because I'm dealing with less than or equal to. And so in this case, any number I put in now, 3 has to be less than any number I put in. So 3 is less than 4, it's less than 5, it's less than 6. So in this case, my arrow is going to the right. And so here we gave some different examples in this video how to graph inequalities. And all we're doing is that we're showing all the possible solutions that every inequality can fulfill.